Material for the brain. Conversations for thinking bodies. Hello and welcome to the 21st episode of Material for the Brain podcast. My guest for today is Itay Yatuv, a dancer, teacher, director, and the founder of Contakids, a methodology that uses physical contact to develop a deeper form of communication between parents and children. I met Itay in 2007, just as I took my first steps into the world of dance. Back then, Itay was the artistic director of a unique dance school called The Group, and after I've decided to join the school's program, he became my main teacher and mentor. Itay made a very profound impact on me, on the way I approach dancing and teaching. He is an extremely playful, funny, and easygoing person, and his way of being as a teacher and mentor helped me to take myself less serious and remember to enjoy the ride. In our conversation, we talked about the current political state in Israel and Itay's involvement in that. We talked about his journey into the world of dance and the different roles and responsibility that he took along the way. We talked about his big project of Contakids and all the wonderful things that he has learned from it, and much more. Unfortunately, there was a technical problem towards the end of the podcast, and the last 5 minutes hasn't been recorded. This is the part where Itay was sharing on his current offering and us exchanging last word and saying goodbye. So I've linked in the description of the episode to all the relevant activities of Itay. So if you're interested to learn more about him and what he's doing, please follow that. And now, without further ado, I'm happy to present you Itay Yatuv. Good morning, Itay. Welcome to my podcast. How are you, my friend?
Good morning, Matan. I'm actually very well this morning. Very happy to see you after a long time.
Yeah, I'm also very excited. You know, it's like it's already you're my 21st guest, and yeah, I've invited many colleagues and people I know, but you have a very special place in my heart because you're my first teacher. You know, it's like the first relationship with somebody in the world of movement. So. Yeah, I carry you in many situations in my heart, so I'm very excited to have the opportunity to have this conversation.
Wow. Thank you. I'm very happy. I remember back in the days. I have a very clear picture in my head the first time we met. And yeah, it's been a journey together, and it's been wonderful to see how you took it, where you took it for. Very inspiring.
So Itay, maybe since we haven't talked for a while, and I keep seeing a little bit what you're doing, you know, through social media. But what is going on with you? Where are you? Where do I catch you?
You catch me in my house in Tel Aviv. If you've been following me a little bit on social media, you've probably noticed that lately I've been more occupied with activism and activist actions, political activism here in Israel. That's something that I've kind of dived into in the last year. I've been always kind of highly politically aware, but the last year has been really kind of dramatic for us here in Israel. We meet in a very optimistic moment for us in terms of this struggle we are holding. So we all hope that in few days a very, very corrupt and bad government on many levels, especially the head of it, will move aside and a new government will come in. That'll be a very, very big relief for us Israelis, and not just. And this is kind of where I am at the moment. But work and my the things I do in terms of dance and movement and working with parents and children, actually, it's also slowly coming back and finding new tracks to roll on.
Yeah, it's very. Somehow, I'm not living in Israel already for 11 years, and it's funny how this round of like the latest escalation in the situation, I was really also diving into it and with a big interest to converse with people. I also had a very long conversation with a Palestinian man that I met online to kind of see things from the other side, and I can also identify that there's a sense of optimism in the air, and it's very kind of refreshing, no?
It's very refreshing, and especially when it comes to the last military actions happening. For me, it's really, when we talk about Palestinians, it's really, for me, it doesn't feel like I'm talking about with the other side. I feel that at least on different occasions, I've felt that in terms of my approach and the way I see things, I was at the same side with the Palestinians. I feel that our government, Israel in general, I don't know if we'll dive into that, but we have a very long conflict here in Israel with the Palestinians. It's been always connected also to the internal political situation, but the last military actions that Israel took on Gaza and on the Palestinians was, for us Israelis, at least for a growing group of population here in Israel, it was very clear that it was linked directly to the political situation or the political stress of the prime minister, trying really in a very cynical and vicious way to gain some political power on the expense of our lives and our children's well-being. And that was a very disturbing moment for many people within Israel.
Maybe I can ask you something, because I remember many years ago you had some kind of a satiric show. No, you did some kind of a satiric show on politics.
Oh no.
No, and I know that you had. I don't want to ask you anything about that show. Don't worry. But I'm saying it because I remember that you had some interest in politics. But what made you to move this change, because to really dive into activism? Because I'm saying it because I know that many people that I'm connected to in the realm of dance and movement people, there is a certain type of escapism of like looking at movement as the pinnacle of importance, and like I'm a dancer or I'm a movement artist, and like surrounding yourself in a certain bubble of like-minded people and let the world be on its own course. And what made you this change from, like to dive into something that is, that brings so much tension? And I can just, I'm just trying to imagine it also from a physical perspective, to be in a demonstration, to like, how did you cope? What pulled you into this direction?
So it's a good question. I'm keeping silence because I have many things to say. So I'll just start, and you'll stop me whenever you feel it's too much. And I will be. I also want eventually to connect it to the work we're doing in dance and movement and contact. Maybe it's almost impossible to grow up in Israel not being involved on a certain level. I mean, there are many people which are not involved, but to really be disconnected in such a small country so small. I'm every time I go to Europe, I find it really surprising how much people are not aware of the size of Israel. Just to give a clear idea or some idea, there are places in Israel that to go from the seashore to the Palestinian border, it's a 20 minutes drive. So to live or to grow up in such a small country, you have to be involved at a certain level, especially adding to that the notion that eventually 95% of all people, when they are 18, they go to the army and they serve. When you are 21, 22, you have already some history with what's going on, and then you can make a choice. I want to disconnect myself. I want to get more involved, but it's a clear decision. It's not like if you grow up in a very big country, it doesn't come across. So you need to have a decision. In Israel, it's different. I've been always interested because I've always believed that the wider circles of politics influence. I would always see the clear line to my personal well-being and to my personal life. Just considering the fact that on a movement level, I cannot move wherever I want in Israel. I cannot go in many places, not just in Israel. I cannot go to our neighbors. The idea that I can't go to visit Lebanon, it's something that always bothered me on a human level. And it's really interesting also culturally that we Israelis, we always think West. So going abroad will never be to our neighbors, or going to another country will never be like getting into the car and going to the north or to the east. It will always go, if you want to go somewhere, you always go to the airport in order to fly somewhere. So I've always found it very, very interesting. I think what happened in terms of my personal activism or activist actions I took, for me, it has to do also with, in a way, it might sound silly, but with the connection of humor, which I love a lot. Humor, comedy, I adore people who know how to use comedy or to make comedy. I like to laugh. And when I was in 2008, I was in New York, and a friend introduced me to the Daily Show of Jon Stewart, and it was very clear the way he was, in a very clever way, using humor and comedy to show hypocrisy and deceiving in the American media. And when I came back to Israel, I started to see more and more of his shows, and I started to see the way he was looking at how the media serve us the information, serve us reality. And I started to look with the same glasses, or try at least, to look on the Israeli media. And once you put on your glasses, you start to see that it's very clear and very specific the way we've been told a story. And I'm not saying anything new. Many people know about it, but it's really interesting once you decide to live your everyday life looking through those glasses, and not just go every once in a while to see a documentary or to hear a lecture about something. You say, oh, that's right, but then you go back to your everyday life. For me, it was, okay, from now on, I'm going to ask every time a question about the motivation, the angle people are choosing when they're telling a story. And I had, at a certain point, I felt it was so clear that this, and especially in Israel, we Israelis, we have that, we tend to think that we grew up in a very open, liberal democracy, but the truth is it's really far from the truth. We are indoctrinated in many ways. It's very difficult for us to admit it, but it's true. And you see it, of course, when when you go abroad and you live in different places and you talk to other people. Slowly, if you have this sense of self-awareness and also the willingness to look at where you are coming from, with some critical perspective, you realize that it can be very disturbing.
Can you give me maybe, Itay, could you give me maybe an example to something that comes in mind when you think about like how, or the illiberal reality in Israel?
I'll give you an example of something which has to do with freedom of speech. Everybody knows about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, for example. Let's take the big thing, the massive elephant in the room every time you enter a room with Israelis. Did you know that you will never, ever hear the word occupation on Israeli media? Never. Not in the Israeli television. It's almost illegal. Not on Israeli television, not on Israeli newspapers, not on the radio, to use the word occupation, which is basically the basic state where the Palestinians are in, is something you won't hear in Israel. Okay? And when you go abroad, everybody will talk to you about the Palestinian occupation. But here we grow up without hearing this word. 3 weeks ago in Jerusalem, a guy, an Israeli guy, Jewish guy, put out a sign from his window, and he wrote four words. He wrote, I'll say it in Hebrew and then I'll translate because it rhymes. He wrote, En Kedusha Be'ir Kovusha, which means in Jerusalem, there is no holiness in an occupied city. That's what he wrote. He didn't write freedom for the Palestinians. He didn't write Israelis are bad. He didn't write any of those things. He wrote, there is no holiness in an occupied city. 2 hours, more or less, after he put a sign on his window, he got a knock on the door from the Israeli police, asking him, demanding him to take away this sign. And when he asked,
I've seen the video.
When he asked why, when he asked why, the police said, "Well, we got phone calls that people are very disturbed by it." And this is something you don't realize when you grow up here. You need to have a perspective to realize that on the very basic level of the rhetoric, the language, we are being blind in many ways. And that's something that bothers me, because I like those radical angles. I like to provoke. I like to get people and myself out of our comfort zone. This is now we can directly connect it to my work with movement, with dance, with improvisation, with children and parents even. That's my interest when I work with people, to find out what are the limitations they are coming with, and to see if I can gently, wisely challenge it. So for me, it's clear. It's the same. It's the same intention when I dance and when I teach or when I work with people and when I hear the news or go out to the street with a sign. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah. First, I must say that I'm from. First, I really respect what you're doing in the sense of the sacrifice that comes with it. I know that it's much. That's why I'm a little bit. I have a little bit of hesitation to criticize people from Israel while I live abroad, and because I feel like I'm doing it from a position that I'm not sacrificing anything, and that's why I have a bit of resistance when I hear a lot of European people criticizing people in Israel. I get the same reaction. Okay, I mean, it's very easy and it's also important, but it's easy to criticize something while you are not risking anything. And it's interesting, that when I left Israel, I was, at least on the Israeli scale, I was on the edge of the left discourse, with not on the edge maybe, but close to the edge. And I left Israel to Europe, and I needed to reflect on my time in the army. But the more I live in Europe, the more conservative I become. and now it's for the sake, and like I'm generally a disagreeable person. So if you say something, I'll take the opposite position to have a conversation. But now, like when I heard you, so I can admit, my first reaction was like, what Itay is talking about? Israel, not a liberal place. And I know, deep inside that there is many things, because I've seen these videos and I'm aware that there is a mix between a certain Western model of democracy and a very ethnocentric state, which is a big conflict and a big challenge. And
I relate to what you're saying regarding living in Europe and becoming a little bit more conservative. I've been living in Europe also for a while, many years ago, and I remember it was always comic for me in a way that in Israel I was always considered like a really extremist to the left, today considered almost a traitor. And every time I arrived to Europe, talking to Europeans, suddenly I found myself starting defending my country, and that's probably the thing I hated the most.
Yeah, because first of all, it's like, I think that what comes with our identity, and that's something that I find very challenging, is that there is this is something I'm still finding my way how to handle it, that I don't feel personal responsibility for the situation in the Middle East, but I know that I'm a drop in an ocean that can take up, I have an individual choice how to handle it. But the moment I start speaking about politics, I'm immediately starting to defend accusations or like something that I'm actually not really responsible for, but I start to take this responsibility and speak in terms of representation. But actually, yeah, we are not doing it. We can be activists, but we are not in a position. If you would be in a political position where your decisions are really affecting millions of people, then we can talk about your personal responsibility. But you're just Itay living in your life, and now you're like...
Yeah, but I understand what you're saying, but I want to relate to something you said even before regarding criticizing what we're doing. The trick for me is try to go into the resolutions. And that's why sometimes, conversations or arguments, also when I go to Europe there, once they stay on a superficial level, they won't go anywhere, because people are trying to hold on to their position, and there's a good and bad. But actually, I was always very happy and inspired meeting Europeans. I lived for a few years in Italy, when they came and they wanted to speak with me, and they knew the history and they knew why this conflict is so complicated. And that's and once I see people who actually kind of dived into it and studied it, it's much easier for me to take a lot of criticism and I'm always happy to receive it. It's just a matter of how willing I am in order to get into the discussion. But if the discussion allows a lot of information to surface, I think criticism, of course, is important, and especially when it comes from Israelis, because the notion to decide to go outside of Israel, and it's again about the unique country that we are. Deciding to go and live somewhere else, it's I guess it's always challenging for many people living their home. But in Israel, there is another extra mile you need to go in order to decide to move to another place which inspires you and you want to try, because there's always this sense of abandonment. Are you abandoning us? We need you. There's this sense of Israel needs
emergency.
Yeah, Israel needs its Jews, and it's such, for me, it's crap. And I live in Israel basically because I like living here, and I like Tel Aviv to be my base, but I really love traveling, and a lot of my work is abroad. But there's the option of going and living somewhere else is always open for me. I'm not here because I'm ideologically believe that I need to be here. Absolutely not. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's a very moving conversation. I feel like that on one hand, it's, I can very easily connect into this kind of word-centric perspective that we are humans, and and I see no difference between me and other people on a very fundamental level, and that we can cross the cultural boundaries and connect. Especially, I think that our work with dance makes it very tangible. How people can be the same to a certain degree. But on the other hand, I think that that's what survival instinct makes us. It brings us back into something that is more tribal, and I really. That's why I think that it's like, I've just seen, like, there was one event in Vienna, I think a year ago or something, that there was a shooting here, and it was a guy who, I think, I'm not sure if I'm saying correctly the detail, but if I remember correctly, it was a guy who was Muslim, and he was shooting around the first district based on some radical religious based, and it's changed the landscape. Like, suddenly people here were like, like something was shattered, a bubble of safety. Before that event, the possibility was not in the air, and now that's it. It's possible to walk in the first district and that somebody will start shooting at you, and then people start speaking differently. It's like, then your belief in a universal perspective, word-centric approach is being tested, and it's much harder to hold it for a long time. And I see it also from a physical practice. Like, I do martial art. Like, when I do contact improvisation, it's very hard for me to open and extend my spine to the back. Like, be vulnerable. When I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I try always not to be vulnerable. It's almost like we are wired to that. And how do you manage to, what holds you to stay so open? Because I think that you're a dying breed in Israel, and that's what's scary for me to some extent. That, like, as you said, like, your position that I'm not that far from is already considered to be a traitor, and that's put even more pressure on you as an individual with the sense of survival. How do you cope with it, man?
It's fascinating what you just said, because suddenly this hippie kind of approach is actually an outcome for a complete circle, probably, that maybe we Israelis are doing, because we've been exposed so much to violence, and we've been creating violence, that a shooting on the street today, in a way, it happens, but we'll very quick go back to normal life. So in a way, it's more and more challenging to kind of get us out of our comfort zone, even though I'm speaking now kind of in a superficial way, because I'm not talking about the traumas and the deep traumas and the post traumas people are living with because of the situation. But there was a really almost surreal moment that in the 1 week which we bombed Gaza, and we killed many innocent people and children, but they shoot back at us, and it was really frightening also to be in Tel Aviv. Not as dangerous, of course, but really frightening and traumatic for children. And I took my daughter, my small daughter Noga, which is actually, she's turning 8 today, and I took her to the north, where a group of contact dancers created a contact camp in a very beautiful point in nature, just above the Kinneret Lake. And for 1 week, it was like the most escapistic event I've been into in years. We heard that there was a mess going on and chaos in the south, and we were there in the nature dancing. At a certain point, there was a moment where from Lebanon, Hezbollah or somewhere started to shoot missiles from the north. And there was a moment we actually heard the bombs. And people were eating, and suddenly we heard the bombs, and we knew already that by the sound of it, that it wasn't that close. So we kept on eating, and we went to rest, and then we went to dance. So we arrived to this place that if we hear bombing, but it's not as close, we can continue dancing. And when you think about it, it's crazy. But that it was a moment that we felt that there's nowhere to run to. The south was in a mess, and here we are dancing, and we hear something is evolving up in the northern border. And what choice did we have? And we chose to keep on dancing. Maybe it wasn't the most responsible choice, but it just kind of shows that we've been going through some distance in terms of how much can you get us into shock. And now we just feel that we want to go back to basic. We want to see people, and we want to touch people, and we want to find again the most common things we have in common, and to start to work from there. And I want maybe to say another thing. When you said before that you looked at the people, at the activist people going to a demonstration after demonstration. For me, going week after week to Jerusalem to demonstrate was the happiest moment in my week. It was Corona time, people were at home, and week after week I went and I met with a huge group of happy Israelis, happy and optimistic Israelis. And it was an event. It was a performative event, and it was healing, because I went outside, because as a dancer I needed space, I needed to move, I needed to touch people. The demonstrations, which sometimes they look aggressive, and sometimes they are, and sometimes they look chaotic, and maybe sometimes they look even dangerous. For the people who are inside of it, to the people involved, to the performers, it's actually a completely different experience. And it's an important one, and it's a healthy one. And it's a generating experience. So maybe just to say that maybe in order to inspire other people in other places who wants to go outside them. And I think the key is to not to be by yourself, to find a group and to gather together and to stick together, whether it's on the street physically and later on through your groups and social media, just to kind of always give each other the sense of being together. Because being by myself, I would go probably once or twice and then I don't know. But I was engaging with other people, were engaging with other people, and we formed packs. And that was the power that kind of drew us every week out to the streets. And it was a very, very positive and important experience. I don't know if it makes any sense.
No, it makes, and I just want to respond to several things. I mean, when you said about this, when I tried to imagine this scenario of, dancing and hearing this whistle of a rocket, and it reminds me, a sentence I heard listening to some lecture of Jordan Peterson talking about the Holocaust and the evolution of National Socialism, and he says like that you go to hell one step at a time. And that and it's obvious that when that hearing it from I had now a conversation with a friend of mine from the UK that she posted a video of I think it was a European person interviewing Israelis on the street and asking them about what they think about the conflict, and many of them responded in a very in Europe, you would call it racist. In Israel, you would say they're just right wings. They just said something like, if they attack us, we have the right to kill them. Things like that. That in Israel, it's like when you hear a demonstration and people shouting, "Shi'isaref lachem hakfar," may your village burn. In Israel, you tell to yourself, okay, these are the right wing people. Like you don't look at it as, you don't see it as, oh my God, this is like fascism on the rise. But in Europe, when you hear these things, and people have been living here in such a materialistic abundance and relative peace, so you look at it from the side and it looks for you like, oh my God, like I asked her, why did you share this video? And she told me, look, it's wrong that people speak like this anywhere on the world. And I was like, yes, it's very true what you're saying. But it's like for me, and knowing where I know, like this is just touching the surface. If this is shocking you, like and I can just imagine. I think that if I would be with you there, I think I would keep dancing myself and I will not freak out, because I do share the same background, and I've wear soldier uniform, and I know this reality. But I can understand how shocking it probably seems from the outside. There were any people who were not Israelis in the camp, or it was really like, it was not an event.
It wasn't a moment for non-Israelis to be in Israel.
Yeah. No, I imagine. I've just spoke to several non-Israelis based in Israel. Yeah, and I think about like when you talk about going out and grouping, and I think that it's something that relates also to a certain personality, because when I hear it, and I think my default operating mode is like a lone survivor. I hear it, I'm like, okay, there is a big group crowding somewhere. I need to find a quiet place to disappear that nobody sees me anymore. So that's kind of in a way what I've done with my life. I kind of went to live in Austria where, I can disappear. And it's starting to change now with the fact that I have a family and I'm not alone anymore. And now I think that this is the first extension that I experienced on a fundamental level of, you are not alone. Your survival is always codependent with others. And I can assume that it gives a lot of power in those situations to realize when we are many, our voice is suddenly amplified.
It amplifies, and actually it's kind of the things that keeps us going together. It's not just having louder voice, but it's really about having a voice for a long time. So, and yeah, and there's many things I can say about the latest Israeli kind of protest. Many things we've learned also mostly from failures. Um, yeah, but we can talk about it for hours. But let, let, let's talk about dance. I said let's dance.
Yeah.
um,
No, it's a, so maybe I'll just to bring us to shift us away, because I know I can also be carried away completely with this conversation, and I think especially because you're so involved. But so maybe you can take a little bit for our audience member who listen to this episode and they don't know you. Maybe you can tell a short introduction to like what have you been doing and what is the work that you're offering, and we will find a way to connect you to this conversation.
the work I'm doing and offering.
Yeah, and how did you got there? Like a bit of your background and.
Okay, so I started up dancing when I was 22, 23. Before that, I was never dancing. I had like an ordinary classic Israeli trail of going to the army for 3 years. At the age of 18, I was in a very physical and very active kind of. I had a very active military training and service, mostly on a medical and rescue angle. And then, like every Israeli, I went traveling for a very long time, very very far away from home. And I think when I was in Brazil, at the end of my trip, in the carnival, dancing in the streets with many many people, I felt a weird sensation that I need to move. It was completely physical. It wasn't mental or. I felt just I need to move, and I finished up and I went to New York to work. That was before 9/11, 98. So there was no problem entering the States and working and do whatever you want. And in New York, I started dancing. I went to a studio and I was looking for something that will catch my eye and heart. And I ended up dancing hip hop and African dance for a very long time. And then I went back to Israel to study in the university history. But I wanted to keep on dancing, so I continued. But this time I went to classical ballet full on. And I had some training in classical ballet. But the big change, the big bang in for me in the world of dance. Actually, now I think I'm kind of celebrating 20 years for that. Was in 2001 when I went to do university semester, studying semester in Italy, in Venice, where I was just kind of hanging out with my new Italian friends and not really studying, not really dancing. But one day, accidentally, I met Caroline Carlson, which is still a big, very important figure in the dance in Italy and France. She's based in France. I met her and she kind of took me under her wings, and she allowed me to enter a very unique dance training in Italy, in Venice, which was related to the Venice Biennale. And that was the first time, 2 or 3 years after I started dancing, that for the first time I was really engaging with real professional dancers, and mostly with an amazing group of teachers, like the best or the most kind of respected teachers in the world, which all of them I never heard of, like dancers from Pina Bausch Company, Bill T. Jones, Wim van de Kebus, all those names that today people are hearing this and they're like, wow. And for me, I didn't know, but it was like a big revelation for me. And I think at that moment I realized that this is what I want to do in life. I want to dance. And then I went back to Israel to complete my studies, but it was really about dance from that point on. And I started teaching at a very early stage. Basically, the moment I came back from Italy, I started teaching in a dance school, in a very unique dance school that you know very well, Hakuvitsa, which is a dance school which allows people, adult people above the age of 20 to start dancing no matter how old they are and what background they have. So you can be a complete beginner at the age of 45 and start a dance training there. And my approach was that I was always just kind of dragging myself and kind of allowing reality to throw me anywhere, and I really love just find myself in a new position and try it out. I think it has to do with the fact that I really have a very interesting relationship with the notion of failure, because I failed gloriously on several occasions, and I enjoyed it very much. So I started teaching, and what happened was really weird. That 2 years after I started teaching, the dance school I was teaching at as the youngest teacher over there, they were about to close it down because both managers wanted out, and no one wanted to take responsibility and to take over. And when the manager called me to invite me to the teachers meeting where they were about to tell everybody, to announce the closure of the school, I told her to wait a moment and to not do it, and to give me like 48 hours to think of a solution, because I didn't understand how come they close a dance school just because no one wants to manage it or to direct it. And after 48 hours, I came back to her and I told her basically, you know what, I will take it. I will take responsibility. And that's how I think at the age of 30, I became the artistic director of a dance school that was about to close down. Zero experience in management, and never been in a conflict or in a confrontation in my life. I found myself in 3 months needing to do a huge reform with another manager who came to support me and to work together with me, to do a massive reform. And that kind of was the first step in a very long journey in directing and working, not just in the studio with people who wants to dance, but also with people who are studying and they have their things and issues, and with teachers who are teaching and they are struggling. And I was the address for anything that happened. It was super intense. I learned a lot, and I did it for like 15 years.
Wow. You're out?
I'm out for almost a year.
This I didn't know. What do you say? Congratulations? I don't know.
Definitely. Mazel tov.
Wow.
I wanted out several years ago, but every time there was another crisis, and they pulled me back in, as the famous saying from The Godfather. But actually, the Corona period was. I found the right moment to say, okay, I think it's enough, and I left. And that's it. In terms of my teaching, I started as a contemporary dancer. I love dancing. I love contemporary dance. I love technique. I adore ballet, and I love contact improvisation, and I love improvising. So there's nothing really that I can say I like more. I really love all those stuff. Naturally, I don't know if naturally, but I became more engaged in contact improvisation because I felt like I have something to give as a teacher that maybe was unique. And I've been teaching contact for 20 years now. I started teaching contact like 1 year after I started dancing contact. Which is kind of what you did, Matan, and I remember that very clearly. And I really liked it, and I really appreciate it because I think that teaching is a very important step for dancers who want to improve their understanding of what they're doing. It's not about just saying, okay, I have something I want to give to others, but it's a completely personal research into my own dancing and quality and technique as well. Yeah.
I want to share. I want to share some stuff, and it's also interesting because it might really connect to kind of why you can hold the opinions that you're holding. First, for the people who are listening, I think it's not clear, maybe from your description, how unique is this school that you're managing, because just the fact that a person like me who never danced in their life could enter this space, and that was a starting point that now, I don't know how many years later, I became a dancer, and that is enough. There is no place in the world that you can do that, because in any dance school, you have to come already to some extent as a dancer. And the opportunity to give people access to what we call professional dance education, which I see it something very valuable also for people who are not interested to become professionals, but just the fact that there is so much body knowledge that is just not so available in any other realm. It's really unique. And one thing that I really remember from joining this training, and that's something that I wonder, like, how could you do it so easily as a director, is your ability to you are really not territorial at all from my experience. And when I say territorial, because the dance world for me, even though that it does represent a different, let's say, political leaning on average, but still you see a lot of same pathologies happening in the dance world that you can see happening in any other communities. So I don't think that the dance will represent any utopia. But one thing that I really remember that was inspiring for me to study with you is how quickly you gave me space to grow. Because I did 1 year of education, and I was probably very unaware of my capabilities back then. And I just told you, hey, I want to teach. And you enabled me to teach in a weekly class, an evening class for adults. And not only that, I remember that like 3 months after I started these classes, the school was was connected to some festival, summer festival. I think it was called Contact in the Summer or something like that. And because I was part of the teachers team in the school, I was also invited to teach in this festival, and it was labeled as something like the leading figures of the contact dancing. And I was like teaching 3 months, dancing a year. And you were like, yeah, go ahead, it's gonna be fine. And I remember how I saw you as something unique, because I didn't get the same feeling of you're welcome here from other colleagues and other teachers. I felt a lot of like, who is this young person who is like, why is he here? And you had this ability of not being territorial and really like, Matan coming doesn't threaten me on a very fundamental level. And I wonder if it's something that if you were thinking about it, if it's just an intuition, like what do you react when you hear this little reflection from my side?
First of all, thank you for sharing. I'm happy to hear. for me, it was really, it's really about, I think the fact that I found myself one day a director of a dance school basically without wanting it, and definitely without having any inspiration or aspiration to do it, really made me want to surround myself with good people and good teachers in order to make it successful, or even to have it survive. I never started dancing in order to become a dancer. I started dancing because I felt I need to move. And actually, the first time I understood that dancing can be something I can be a dancer, or I can consider myself as a dancer, was when some teacher came to me after class, after like 2-3 years, and asked me to join her project. And I was like, why is she asking me? I just want to dance. So I think maybe the fact that I never came through the door of being a professional, and I kind of kept a sense of just curiosity about what we're doing, regardless of where it's taking us. So the whole notion, and with this notion, it's still inside of me. One day I became an artistic director. So I guess I didn't have enough time to understand, or to also to adopt the approach of being like at the head of some pyramid or something. But also it was never my real interest. And I really like basically to work with people I love, and it has also to do, of course, with talent and seeing potential. And with this, maybe I want to connect this with the Italian story I told. I think my biggest gratitude towards Caroline Carlson, which is 80 today, was that on a very deep level, she realized that she was standing in front of a young man who had a passion in order to give it a chance. And I'm really, really grateful for her for that. And I feel that in a way, I kept this kind of notion with me. And sometimes for me, it's enough to see real passion and curiosity in someone in order to allow him to explore. Then later on, it might fail, it might happen. It's okay. But another thing that really happened after you left the school and continued with your journey is that I decided that I prefer to have students who are good and passionate about what they're doing come back to the school as teachers than to go outside and look for teachers, professional and experienced teachers from outside. And when I left the school, like half of the teachers at the school were my former students, or the school former students. And for me, this is something which I really enjoy. And so, yeah, and maybe on a deeper level, I was looking for someone who will come and replace me at the school, because that's what it wasn't something I wanted to do. So maybe on a deeper level, I was hoping you will kind of take over at a certain point, but it didn't happen.
No, it's a. But this is something I find very unique, because when I think about what is the difference between living in our profession and having a position than just freelancing, it really immediately pulls me to the notion of safety. I just had a conversation yesterday with a good friend and with my wife, and I told them like, well, I'm so tired of always pushing something, you know, like always like investing so much energy in just generating the ability to work. I just want to work, you know, like just give me a position in a university, I'm going to teach. And to hear that for you is like, you are in this pinnacle of safety, at least in the dance world. Not that it represents, you know, a materialistic abundance, but still it is a form of safety. And you're like just waiting to get rid of it and to find somebody to take over. And it's not common, because I think that most people really try to hold tight to what they know. You know, talking about politics and the conversation we had, it's like, that's more natural. No, you're in a position, you have power, you have authority, and you don't want to let go. And I think that that's something that was very inspiring to be next to.
So let's take this notion and take it straight into the dance. When we dance, you and I, are we willing to stay where we are, where we know each other and where we feel safe, and with the moves and the technique we have, or are we willing to crash and see what's happening then? I think for me it's really related to the way I like to dance, and the way I like to dance is the way I like to play. And when you play, or when I play, I can sometimes start to get bored, and it doesn't matter with whom I'm playing. So my interest is not to get too bored. And when I was directing a dance school at a certain point, I just got really, really bored. And I felt it in my body. There was no, it was over. And of course, like you said, there was this thing of, you know, the one person who really kind of was very disappointed for me leaving my position as an artistic director was my daughter, because she was really enjoying saying that her father is a director, and now she's like, what can I say about you? And I was like, I was like, just say that now I'm nothing again, and let's see what happens. She really would say just for the title, and I'm really enjoying just having, like, being a substitute teacher again. It's great. It's great sensation.
And I said what I said, but I do want to also challenge you a little bit on something that me personally, I don't see anything with it. But like, first, how is it developed? How is it going with the other big project with Contakids, this parent and teacher? Maybe you can introduce a little bit and share, like, update me a little bit what is happening with that.
So Contakids is basically, it's a group dynamic method I've kind of developed, which invites toddlers, usually at the age of between 2 and 5, to step into the studio with their parents and start playing around. It's not about spending time together on a physical level. So being physical together, what does it mean? It can mean many things, and the idea is to offer some exercises, some games, super, super simple, but at the same time to remind everybody in the space, especially the parents, that each one of them, the children and the parents, can choose what they want to do. So they can join me when I offer them to do an airplane to each other. But if a child wants to sit outside, or wants to eat, or even wants to go home, I really encourage the parent to respect their wish, and thus to create a very unusual democratic experience and very intimate between a child and a parent. And the development of Contakids is super cute. There's something a little bit exotic about it because it was kind of born from 3-minute YouTube clips of me playing or dancing with my 2 years and 4-month-old daughter, Sophie, 10 years ago almost, which someone took on video and put it on YouTube, and it became quite viral. And I had people starting calling me and writing to me, asking me, how do I play and move with my toddler like that? And it kind of drove me into this experimental phase where I was just bringing children and parents into a space, offering them to play together with the games Sophie and I played together in our living room on the floor, and realizing that what was very natural for us and what was very happy and easygoing and safe for Sophie and I wasn't the same thing for many others. It surprised me. I didn't think it was an issue, but apparently it was, and that was the beginning of a super interesting exploration I've been doing for the last decade, basically working with a lot of children and their parents together, and working with people who want to work or are working with children and parents on a physical level. Basically, what I found out, or so far, is that in, let's say, Western society, most parents, they don't have this tendency to go down to the floor and to just play around with their children in physical games. And when I say physical games, it can be anything. Many parents will decide not to go down to the floor. So they keep the height difference between themselves and their children. And many of them will, if they will want to play or spend some quality time with the children, they will look for something which is a little bit more intellectual or in the head. So they will read a story, they will read a book, or they will play a game or other games, which I can relate, and I love to do it as well. But the option of just hanging out together and doing silly things together, like animals, it's not an option. And because it's not socially expected and accepted for adults to be silly and childlike on the floor, because most adults today, they don't feel comfortable enough with their own body and movement in order to do so. Sometimes they feel really insecure with their own body, and when it comes to the children, they feel even less secure in kind of playing together with rolling in upside down. So it's like they're trying to avoid it. But for me, the most interesting thing that we discover is that once they are willing to try it, and they are willing to go down to the floor and to be playful, the children become, something changes with the child, something opens, something like there's a light coming in to the space. Children love to play with their parents. They love to see their parents rolling and being and laughing and just being foolish and making noises. Something opens up in the child, and it's something really, really unique that I haven't seen probably in any other child parent engagement. I mean, there are, but in the extent of it happens in the studio, it's really unique, and the feedbacks really kind of shocked me in the beginning. Now I know to in a way even to expect them, but many parents reported that they see a change happening in the physicality of their children in terms of the things they are willing to try, how experimental they become in their physicality at home, trying to climb things or just kind of take it easy when they are falling, and the change their parents are experiencing on themselves in terms of, not just in terms of their own body movement and body awareness and their willingness to touch and to play, but also in the way they perceive the child's experience. So let's say they see the child climbing on the sofa, maybe now they will allow him to try, knowing that he might fall or she might fall, but they will probably be okay. And that's, for me, a very, very interesting step to make as a parent, but maybe also just as a person, yeah. So
it's interesting that it's so uncommon now to, or at least I don't know, because for me it's maybe also because of the contact background. It feels so natural to let my kids crash somewhere. But so in the beginning, did you associate this more into like, now I'm going to teach people to do contact with their kids, and then it developed into something else? Or what was or from the beginning for you, it had no relation to contact improvisation?
No, the name Contakis is deceiving. It's probably a very bad choice for a name, because even though like 99% of the parents coming to the class never heard about contact improvisation, so for them it's okay. But for the contact improvisation community, it became very clear that I'm offering contact improvisation classes for children and parents, which is in a way so, but it's really not about that. No, I was just trying to bring children and parents into the space and make them play. I was really struggling in making them play because I was really surprised by how difficult it was for them to do something that for me was very natural at home, and I guess for you as well. You know, the day before the first class, it all happened because a group of friends and neighbors just at a certain point told me, okay, just teach us, bring us into the studio and teach us. And the evening before the class, I was really nervous because I didn't really know what to do. And me and Sophie, we sat and we made a list of the games we were playing on the floor. And I went into the studio with the list, and I was terrified because I didn't know what to expect. And I thank God Sophie was there with me. She was very proud, and she was like, she was very supportive. And actually, that was the only time she participated in a class as a teacher with me, co-teaching with me. It never happened again, and maybe I can say a word about that afterwards. But then what I did, we just went through the list, and I said, okay, now we're going to do airplanes, and we showed them how we do airplanes, and people were struggling with airplanes, and then we showed them this way we run backwards, and people were trying to run backwards. And then we showed them a different way of rolling on each other. And it just became a massive party and the children were going crazy of happiness, and the parents were kind of like they didn't know what was going on.
What to do?
Yeah, but the most important thing is that they all wanted to come back, and they wanted to do it again, and that was like the thing, because now I know it already. When I do a first class, when I open a course of Contakids, so the second class, some parents, they come to me and they tell me, you know, my child, she never stopped talking about this class all week long, and we were waiting for that. And sometimes I ask the parents, and I ask them, you know, what do you think she wanted to come back? Why did she wanted to come back? Why do you and they said, because she was jumping and she was rolling and she was falling, and she likes to do it. And then sometimes I ask them and I tell them, but you know, when you go with your child to the playground, this is what they do. They jump and they fall and they roll. So basically, this is exactly what's happening in the playground. So why do they want to come back to this class? And it takes the parents sometimes some time to understand that the unique thing about this kind of class is that they roll and they jump and they fall with daddy or with mommy, and this is what the children want to do sometimes, maybe not all of the time, but for sure they miss it if they don't do it. So it's really about the engaging element. It's not about just about the falling. It's just about doing it with mommy, which was unique. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because because I've seen the for me, at least in my mind, I've seen the video of you dancing with Sophie, and it was happening in a Contact festival. So for me, I was like, yeah, of course, Itay is a father. His daughter comes with him to a festival. There is a jam. She's in the space. They are moving together because they feel comfortable. And it looks a little bit like a Contact dancer doing the first Contact dance with his daughter. Maybe not the first, but like a first on camera. And I think that many people develop this association to what you're doing as if it is really like a platform to teach contact improvisation to children. And it's funny that somehow in the world of contact improvisation, there is on one hand the desire not to frame what contact is or can be, but on the other hand, like I heard some, like I was in Freiburg many years ago, and I heard people having a discussion about if it was okay to brand it Contakids or not okay to brand it Contakids. And now when I hear this story, I'm like, yeah, it's actually, it's not even related to contact. So what's the problem? And but now, do you feel like that after all these years, do people that come in and want to be teachers and want to be involved with, is there still a legacy that connects it to the dance world, or you really manage to, go somewhere else and develop your own niche that is not at all based on that? Because I'm asking because I think that it's quite beautiful that you've managed to bring people who are at all not dancer, like just parents who are, they don't know what contact improvisation, and they go into something that I would even imagine could be a preparation for them to maybe later join a contact improvisation class, because they are starting to play. They're starting to get in touch with their body in a way that has some legacy in the training that we've done together in the studio, no? Or am I getting it wrong?
With movement, yes. With contact improvisation, as we know it, no. It has to do a lot just with the notion of playfulness, and with the aim to remind mostly, or maybe only, parents that playfulness is very, very important in the way we interact with our children. Um, and I'll say also something about this discussion you've heard. I relate to it very much. I think on a very deep level, Contakids is one big bullshit. Because what are we doing? What am I doing? I invite parents and children to the studio. I take money from them. They drive. Sometimes they're in traffic jams. They arrive after half an hour, 40 minutes. And then for 45 minutes, I just show them stupid games I did with my 2-year-old on the carpet. And that's it. And then they go home happy. So what are we doing here? I feel that in a more healthy world, and in a more kind of area, I don't know the word in English, meuvrar, ventilated world, parents will just have more time to spend with their children, just because they're not in a race, and they don't struggle to bring food and salary back home, and they will spend more time with their children. And if they will spend more time with their children, without, not just by having time, but also by deciding not to have their smartphones close to them, or needing to take care of another baby around, but just kind of create some intimate quality time with their children, it will happen. That's the only reason I do Contakids, because people are not, they're not aware of the fact that they can do it by themselves. I didn't reveal anything. I didn't sit on the top of a mountain and meditate for 2 weeks and came up with this idea. This idea came out of lack of something. I branded it and I gave it a name because people asked me to give it a name. Because without the structure, without the framing, they just wouldn't see it. And in today's world, sometimes you need to frame things to people in order for them to see it. Otherwise, it's out there. But if we have a moment of sincerity, Contakids is just pointing out that there's something really wrong going on in our society today in terms of parenthood. And if things will just get a little bit better, or we'll find a way to engage on a very simple level with our children, and on a physical level, because that's the way they know from the very beginning, stupid classes like Contakids will just disappear from the world, and I will be the first happy man, free again.
Yeah, because
regarding that,
I think because I knew you personally, so when I heard this conversation, I was immediately like, hey, Itay is not territorial, like what's just go and meet the person instead of projecting your bullshit. And I think that that's very it's very interesting to hear it from you, because that's something like that I think that is also a little bit I saw this quality, this reactive quality in you as my teacher, which is not sitting on the top of the mountain as you describe it with a vision of where should Matan go as my student, but as a person who is able to be in a room and see like, okay, I get this feedback, so then I'm going to tip it a little bit there, just a little bit. And then I'm going to get that feedback and I'm going to tip it a little bit there. And in a way, for me, this is the complete opposite of the, the guru teacher that people can associate with somebody who is developing something. And because and to hear what you're saying, it's a beautiful way also to see that things can grow, even if you're not coming with this, entrepreneurial mission that I'm going to create now, the new thing that every parent would want, but you're just like, okay, there is some need and I'm just reacting to this, and suddenly it grows and grows and grows. And I wonder, like, I can assume that also maybe you are surprised by the, like how it happens. And because I think that this is also something that I think that on a very deep level is missing, like the humbleness that it's not about us. Contakids is not about Itay Yatuv's method of parenting. It's just about people's needs. And very often I see that, somebody develops a certain idea and then it becomes about the person and about their idea and not about the people who are consuming the idea. And also so then it becomes this vertical hierarchy that everybody is serving the top and not that the top is feeding and nourishing the bottom. And that's something for me very unique to witness and to see that it's possible, because for me, I'm struggling with it, to be honest. I'm struggling with with not building self-importance. And you are one of the, I'm telling you, like, deep in my heart, every time I take myself too seriously, I have an image of you somewhere and I come to ask you. I remember this question, I had one class with you, I came in the group and you did some exercise that took the whole class, like we were just keep dancing the whole class and you didn't say much. And then I came to you at the end of the class, and for me it was such a meaningful class, and I came to you and I asked you, so Itay, why did you do this? It was so meaningful. Like, what was your idea behind it? And you look at me, it's like, I don't know. And you did it in such an honesty, like, man, I'm not trying to bring you into your unique place. It's like, it's you're doing it. I'm just here. I flipped, I pressed play on the CD and you did it. I'm not responsible. And that's for me such a reminder of like, okay, don't build self-importance. It's not about that when going into the studio and teaching. And yeah, this is something I'm still, it's still very inspiring to see, even in this great brand that has so many teachers, that it's still like you can keep this quality.
Before you spoke before about your experience when you came to Vienna and you wanted to kind of base yourself, and you expressed an experience that I can definitely relate to, of about trying to be an initiator and to produce things and to push towards different directions. And I think this is an amazing quality. And it's very, very important in this world to have people who know how to do it. It took me some time to understand that that I don't really like to push. I like to react. So I like, in a way, I like to be number two. And I also like when things are not clear all the way through, because then it leaves some space for your own interpretation of what you're doing, So maybe if you came to me back then at the end of the class and you would ask me this question, and I could have given you maybe a very clear answer, and maybe you would hear this answer and you say, that's really great, now I understand something. But at the same time, you could have taken this answer of mine and just think about that, and you would and put aside maybe another thing or two which were very meaningful for you while doing it, but because it wasn't my intention, you would think that it wasn't important. And actually, I think what my students are experiencing and what they're taking from something I do is way more important than my initial intention. So, and sometimes I do have a clear intention, but I like to see how I bring an intention into class, and then it just go in a whole different direction. And sometimes it makes me frustrated, but this is kind of the way I choose. You know, when we start the Contakids teachers training, which is a very intense week, I tell the people who come that I want them at the end of the week to tell me what Contakids is for them, and this is what Contakids is, because I'm just sharing an idea, but then what you do with this idea, this is what makes this idea into reality. So that's why whenever, and again, they get the name and the brand, and they can call themselves Contakids teachers, but eventually what they're doing, I don't really know. I just hope they carry with them a sense of a reminder of my wish to allow parents and children and a platform to spend quality time together. That's it. In any, they can choose the method they want to use.
And maybe this is the kind of the legacy from contact improvisation into Contakids, that I think that it developed also in certain way, that, you know, people came, they danced, they took some classes, and then they just went on and kept on their own thing with some anchor to what they've learned, but also developing their own idea and allowing it, you know, the fact that you don't need to do a once a year, I don't know, like a checking that everybody is following the guidelines. But for you, I guess, do you have guidelines when you teach kids and parents? I mean, I did it once, you know, I was very inspired after, in the COVID, I took an online class with you. It was a recorded class that you shared, and I did it with my kids. And I think that, and I thought, wow, like it's, even though that my kids are used to play a lot with me, there was a lot of new things that were very exciting for them. And then Leali told me, hey, you have to do it with the kindergarten. And we did it over Zoom, and I was like, wow, this is like super challenging to do. And that was Zoom, you know, so I didn't even need to deal with the fact that they're all in the same room screaming. It was like, you know, they were on mute. So I cannot imagine what happens when you cannot
like a dream.
Mute the room. What?
It's like a dream to put all the children on mute. Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah. Continue. I want to hear.
No. So I'm asking, like, so from your very reactive, open, curious teacher, when you enter this room with all the kids, did you have to establish something a little bit more structure, a little bit more, you know, anchored, or you just kept this kind of very open, principle-based experience?
Okay, so here's the thing. I'll say the bottom line, and then maybe if you want, I'll explain. Contakids class is by definition chaotic. By definition, it's loud and it's unexpectable. Any attempt I will do to try to kind of bring order into it will end up in failure. So what am I doing there, and what's my role as a teacher? And basically, this is kind of what we're working on in the teachers training. It's all about group dynamic. What we're practicing is, or what I am practicing, is containing a chaotic platform. So on the one hand, it is chaotic and I can't really control it. But on the other hand, there's a lot I can do in order to allow everybody to feel contained within the chaos. I don't know if it's clear or if it makes any sense, but
it's very clear. I feel it's right. It's like parenting. It's almost like parenting, because that's what I'm confronted very often with my kids, you know, like that their energy is just out there and I cannot control it. And when I try to control it, I have to use force to some degree. You know, I have to enforce my will on them. And then that's quite frustrating unless you have a very dictatorial character and you enjoy applying force on people. But then there's also the other side that, you know, that kids don't get along perfectly and it's not harmonious. And sometimes, you know, they can go and start biting each other. And then, so there's the tension between the need to give them the space to freely express themselves. But on the other hand, to have the acknowledgement of that I am the mature person that understand more consequences, or like, how do you negotiate it there? Like, what is the tools? Maybe you can share a little bit. What are the tools that you said like that I can intervene into the chaos?
Aikido. I just threw a word in order maybe to get it, but basically, I train in Aikido for many years, and it's what I like in Aikido is that when you get energy, you don't try to block it. You invite it in, and then you decide what you want to do with it in a very hopefully delicate way. So, and I like to take, I like sometimes to take those kind of ideas and to try to put them in matter, in movement, in body, in the studio. So. I'll share with you a kind of an exercise I do, which I feel kind of reflect what's going on for a Contakids teacher inside this kind of a chaotic environment. We do just imagine that I will ask you to cross the room from one side to the other, and to walk from one side to the other peacefully. And firmly, not too fast. But on the way, there will be people waiting for you, and every time you pass beside one person, he will need something from you. He will have a question, or he would like to try something with you. He will jump on you. He will hold your hand. She will want to hug you or to take you somewhere. And each one of them will have a will, and each one of them will have will want your attention for something. And you don't want to tell them go away. You don't want to kind of lidchot. How do you say?
Shut them.
Yeah.
To shut them off.
Yeah, you don't want to shut them off. But at the same time, you have a mission, remember? And the mission is to cross the room to the other side, to arrive to the other side. Now, how do you do it? And basically, this is how you run a Contakids class. How do you do it? This is something we are working on. But basically, you need to find your inner strength and flexibility to be present in any given moment with whoever is there with you, and to be generous with them. And at the same time, remember that you have your own way you need and you want to pass. So so for me, this is how you. This is the training for me in the Contakids realm, and it's a fascinating process because it's such a personal process. You know, if you and I will go through the same room with the same interruptions, with the same people, psychologically, energetically, we will react differently for every situation. And we need to work with that. I don't know. I don't remember your question, and I'm not sure I answered it. But
no, you answer. I mean, I asked you what if you have some kind of a guideline for yourself to handle the chaos, and I think that what you've just described for me, it's a very clear image, because I think when I think about interaction with children in various ages, I think what is kind of fundamentally different is kind of how like the time scales that their needs to be met. You know, like when a kid, like when my son ask Papa, I want to show you something, and I tell him, hey, I'm on the phone. So, you know, it's not the end of the story. It's not like, okay, father is on the phone, I'm going to wait here and I'm patiently. No, it's just, and I think that's something like that children are like, at least this is what I'm learning from fatherhood, exactly what you're saying. Like, I need to cross straight, but the straight there has to be some adaptation. And to some extent, something that I've developed after, now that my kids are 7-year-old, is like, when I meet adults that are very repulsed by children's presence, I become a little bit suspicious. And I know, because I know that it's something that indicates for me a certain lack of ability to put yourself aside. And maybe that's, and I felt that you've been able to do it with me as an adult in the studio. So like, no wonder that it's like, that it's going so well with the Contakid, and it's really inspiring to see.
Yeah, thank you. It wasn't like that in the beginning. You know, the beginning was kind of tough. I did try to control it more, but then I ended up a 45-minute session, completely wet from sweat and with a headache, and I was like, why? What happened? That I kind of, where did it came from? I'm used to teach 6 hours contact, you know, like no problem. And it took me some time to understand that I'm really struggling in order to create something which is not natural for this kind of an event. And I was afraid. I was afraid of maybe being criticized by the parents coming to the space with their ambitions and their expectations. And it's all part of like what we need to work on when we are working with in this kind of field, because working with adults is great. Working with children, I guess it's great. I've never worked with just children, but as you just said, like putting yourself or inviting a dynamic between a child and a parent into a space is really a big gamble. You can never know, and you can never know who you're facing, and what's the dynamic between the child and the parent. And the beautiful thing about this work for me is that in a 45-minute session, just offering playful moves and hanging out together, you get to see so much nuances and micro dynamics between a child and a parent, and you really can imagine the way they are kind of acting back at home. And it's really interesting to observe this. You can learn a lot. I mean, I learn a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I from just that tiny experience I had with doing it over Zoom, it was like kind of a, like a snapshot into the window of what you're probably going through. And I was like, wow, like respect, like you, it's like super challenging. Itay, I know I can keep talking a lot, but I also guess that, at a certain point we will have to finish. And I want to give you some space to share with people that are listening where they can continue learning, consuming, watching, I don't know, things that you're doing, and just share a bit like where people can catch you if they want to study dance with you or they are interested in the Contakids universe.
So I'm accessible on Facebook, and you can basically what I'm doing now is I do teachers training for people who want to work with children and parents through this method that I call it Contakids. And usually so far we're doing kind of like 2-3 teachers training around Europe each year and one in Israel. So you can find me on contakids.com. Maybe, I don't know, we can share a link later on. And in terms of...
Yeah, I will put it in the description.
Thank you. And I also teach contact improvisation in various events and festivals around the world. But I'm also very much, now at least, available for to come and to teach wherever. Like, you know, weekend intensives, and I like also to teach dance. I love flow work, obviously, and I incorporate a lot of from martial arts as well. That's basically it. Itay Yatuv, it's a unique name because...
If you want to see more precious and insightful moments, make sure to check our short clips playlist. To see longer interviews, check out the full episode playlist just below it. And to be notified for all future videos, click the subscribe button and don't forget to hit the notification bell. See you on the next episode.